You're listening to the Music Tech Teacher podcast, episode number 52. Welcome to the Music Tech Teacher podcast. Music tech tips, lesson ideas, advice, news, and interviews, especially for music teachers. Brought to you by midnightmusic.com.au. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Music Tech Teacher podcast. I'm Katie Wardrobe, a music technology education trainer, speaker and consultant from midnightmusic.com.au, where I help music teachers use technology effectively in music education. In this episode, South Australian music teacher Jenny Chapman describes what it was like to have to switch over from Macs to Surface Pros, a really common thing that I hear about from teachers. And she therefore had to find an alternative to GarageBand, which she had been using with her students for more than 10 years. She ended up discovering it wasn't so bad. She ended up using Soundtrap to put together a collaborative cross-curricular composition project with her grade 6 students. And Jenny talks us through the details of that project in this episode. You can find the links to the things we talk about on the show notes page for this episode at midnightmusic.com.au/52. Today my guest is Jenny Chapman, who is the Junior School Music Co-ordinator at St John's Grammar in Belair South Australia, which is in the beautiful Adelaide Hills. She teaches students right from early learning centre right through to grade 6. And Jenny says she's now in what you might call her senior years, but on most days she doesn't feel a day over 45, and she attributes this to a lifelong love affair with music and sharing this passion with children and adults. Previous jobs include working at a Lutheran boarding school in Alice Springs for Indigenous secondary students and also at the Friends School in Hobart, Tasmania, which is the only Quaker school in the Southern Hemisphere. I was surprised to learn that when Jenny let me know. While in Tasmania, she also founded the Choir of High Hopes for people experiencing disadvantage in all forms. And in January just this year, she fulfilled a lifelong dream and went to Tanzania, where she volunteered with Projects Abroad, doing a 2-week teaching stint at a Maasai preschool near Arusha. And I hope I said that correctly. How was it teaching in Tanzania?
Oh, it was absolutely fantastic, Katie. It was an hour's trip to get to the school each day, so it was sort of right on the outskirts of Arusha, which is 100 kilometres from Mount Kilimanjaro, underneath Mount Meru, which is also a famous mountain in Tanzania. So it was a very basic school, but it was a lot of fun. And being early learning, like 3 to 5, it was challenging. We made maracas out of all the water bottles I drank on my safari, and we made Play-Doh in the shed with an open fire to water. We made paper plate tambourines, and it was really good. I really enjoyed it.
Fantastic. Yeah. It would have been a fantastic experience. I think it's great just seeing a different type of place and with different resources. I just did an interview yesterday with another music teacher who's based in New Zealand, and he did a similar thing where he went overseas and worked in a place, I can't remember exactly where it was, but he said they only had a whiteboard and a whiteboard marker, and that was it, nothing else, no other resources or technology, and it took the teaching back to basics.
We had a blackboard and no electricity, and so to play music, I bought a Bluetooth speaker so I could play it off my phone, and somebody had donated a laptop to the school, so I left my Bluetooth speaker with them so that they could actually hear the music properly on the thing. And I also bought a roll-up keyboard that you can get off the internet, so it rolls up, like that in your suitcase and works on batteries. Not particularly satisfying for a pianist to play, but it did the job.
I've always wondered, I haven't ever tried one of them. I've seen them, I've heard about them, a number of people I know have tried them, because I think they were, a few years ago, they were sort of touted as this inexpensive option for schools, great roll-up keyboard. But I was a little bit sceptical from that keyboard player's point of view as well. Like, you need to feel the keys, and it's kind of a flat surface, isn't it?
It is, yeah, but it was good to, I could basically play basic two-hand stuff, enough to get by, but it also has the demo feature on there, which has a number of, different songs that I use for sort of freeze games and things like that as well.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, there's always some benefit.
Yeah.
Now, Jenny's, we've met a few times at different workshops and, a couple of times at the daytime series of one-day conferences. And you recently wrote to me to say thanks for suggesting Soundtrap because you needed an alternative to GarageBand, or GarageBand as we say here. And I'm going to get you to talk through this tech project that you've described that you've used Soundtrap for. But I wanted to talk first about switching to new software because I know that you spent a lot of time using GarageBand with your students in the past, but your school decided to switch from Macs to Surface Pros, which is a really common thing. And then that means that GarageBand is no longer an option, of course, because it's not available outside the Mac environment. So was it daunting to hear that they were going to make a switch?
Not only daunting, but very frustrating. And I put up a fight for probably 6 months to a year, but I lost, partly because the school was trying to get the most affordable option right through the school. And because there are so many more internet-based programs now, they said, you'll be right, you'll find something. Well, the first year I tried something what didn't suit me at all. I probably won't name it. And then I came to daytime conference and happened to grasp onto the fact that you said Soundtrap, and that was really good. And it's actually refreshing to have something a little bit different, but that works in a lot of the same ways. Plus it's got some extra features as well.
Yeah, that's what I really like about it too. And I think it's quite similar to GarageBand really in the way that it works. And one thing that I'm always saying in workshops to people who have to switch, or even to teachers that need to work with a lot of different devices and they need a solution that will work on everything. Once you've learnt one program, I don't think it's so bad when you switch to a new one because of the same sort. So digital audio workstation in this case. And, I find that there are things that you can transfer across in terms of skills. So did you find that too? And it wasn't as bad?
Yes, I think, I've only used the basically the loop-based part of it so far. In that project, but finding the loops and transferring them to the page and editing the loops and doing the volume controls and all those sort of things were fairly straightforward.
Yeah. And anything you miss from GarageBand that's not in Soundtrap at this stage, or
I'm not sure about whether all the sound, you get your favourite sound effects and things like that. So I really need to spend some more time. We'll do another project this year to spend some more time myself, just seeing what's in there. But I was actually delighted with what the students did and how quickly. I mean, students usually cope with technology a lot better than us. And how well they got on with it. So
I think one of their strengths is just to kind of like click around and just test things out. I know my own kids do this a lot, and I've learnt to do that over time too. And to not be afraid of just looking for things. Yeah. Whereas I think as adults who, we all did not really grow up with technology, and you get a bit scared. Not so much for me anymore, but I used to be scared of like breaking stuff or maybe the whole thing will blow up, which it won't. Of course it won't. There is some damage you can do, but hopefully not.
Well, a couple of the students actually recorded themselves playing guitar and so on. So I saw how that, that feature was used. So
that's really good. And did you find... Yeah, and did you find any, because Soundtrap, of course, for those that might not know, is internet-based, so it's like a website that you visit, you have an account, you log into it. So, of course, it relies on a decent internet connection, and especially, like you say, when you're recording audio, that's particularly important. So have you had any issues, say, with the school internet, or has it gone pretty smoothly?
Actually went much smoother than I thought it would. Just the initial logging in issues and making sure, because we had to use the addresses that the school had set for the children. So I had to work with the IT department, and they actually set up the login addresses for me. And so then I would manage it from there. And then because my subscription started in the middle of the year, I've actually got this half of the year that I have to swap all the students over when I get to it.
Yeah, right. That's
then I'll buy another year. So, really, I should be more organised and do it for a full year, but that just wasn't the way it happened.
Yeah, and then things like that happen, don't they? And that's funny because that brings you sort of more in line with the Northern American school year in a way, which is sort of like second half of the year through to the first half. So yeah.
The thing about Soundtrap too is there's a community of people that you can actually belong to and write, put down your questions and share your work with and so on. So, and even the people, who were selling it to us, would send an email, how's it going? So, you could actually ask for advice if you needed help with anything.
Yeah, that's really good. And is that is that a Facebook group that you're part of, or is it just on the Soundtrap website?
You can just get it via email.
Oh, yeah.
I think.
Oh, that's
comes
good.
via email, then you just click on a link and I think it just takes you into that community.
Yeah.
I honest, I haven't really gone into it much because I'm not doing the project at the moment, but I'll get back to it.
Yeah, so tell us about the project. I mean, you described it to me, and I was really interested in it, and that's why I thought it would be great to chat about it on the podcast episode.
Okay. Well, every year I have to produce an annual concert, and it's for year 3 to 6, and every year I take a theme and try and make all the items, in those year levels sort of work towards that theme. And last year I chose the theme of emotions in music and how music has the power to move emotions and how music can invoke emotion. And it was actually, we started the project at the very end of term 1, beginning of term 2, and it went right through to the end of term 3. So it was a long-term project. And so a lot of scaffolding done before we even started with Soundtrap. We played music. I played music, got them to write down the emotions they felt with that music. We looked at some videos and we turned the music off, and they had to describe what music they would put to it, and there are lots of drama and things we did with it. And then we also did a bit of a poll on the way they express themselves. So in one class, the other class, not the class that did this project, they wanted to do something humorous. So we ended up writing a parody to Let It Go. We called it Let Me Go.
Oh, excellent. Good song to parody.
Yes, and there's a lot on the internet as well. And then this other class were very keen about natural disasters, which is part of their Year 6 work, and they were a little bit more seriously in tune with it all, and they decided they'd like to do a natural disaster. So we ended up deciding on doing an earthquake. And so my idea was that perhaps they could produce the soundtrack using Soundtrap.
Yes.
And that then they would stage it with using their backdrop. So in the first instance, with my help, we worked out a scenario that went for about 3 minutes, and 6 scenes. So the scenario was, and the kids had to actually fill in lots of, what would you say, mind maps or charts about, what they foresaw happening in these scenes. So, and there were some incredible ones we couldn't use as well, very creative ones. But what we decided to use was a street scene where people walking across the street, and there was a party going on in the background. So that's the first little bit of the music that you hear is a party, and we had a sheet with a light behind, and we had like silhouetted students doing dancing there. They're walking across the street, and then all of a sudden the music there's a little pause in the music, and they look around and they say, what's happening? Oh, nothing. They go on, and then the earthquake sounds actually happen. And then when the earthquake happens, people fall over, they get injured, whatever. And then there's that really still aftermath where it's just all very eerie. And then after the aftermath, there is the emergency services that come in, and they come in and they pick up the pieces, and then there's the rebuilding phase. So each of those scenes take about 15 seconds. They're only really token scenes.
Yeah.
The music is reflected in that. And so what I got the children to actually practice acting those 6 scenes out, so they really could feel all the emotions to do with it before they even began to compose the music.
That's really great.
Then we got to the composing, and I gave them a group to compose in. So I just gave them one of those scenes, and a couple of people's music actually that they wrote ended up being in a different scene, but that's just how it turned out. And I was honest with them. I said, I haven't used this program before, so it's all very new. But the thing was that it has the collaboration tool.
Yes, and that's the big difference, isn't it, really, between one of the major differences between GarageBand and Soundtrap is the collaboration tool.
And it's actually brilliant because it made the whole thing possible, because what they could do was invite me And so and it ended up being that a group, maybe one or two people had worked on a particular thing themselves, and sometimes it was just an individual. It just depended. Not everybody's ideas got into the actual finished product, but they all had a go. And there was some, the actual earthquake sounds themselves were really quite brilliant the way the girl did that. And so I got all of their projects, and then I had to cut and paste basically. And there was just a couple of little things I added in to make the smooth segue, between sections. But a lot of it was actually cutting because, of course, they had more than we needed. So I was able to take the best bits of what they'd done, put it together. And then we had to stage it. So we got that finished early, I think, in the term 3, and our concerts at the end. So then we had to actually work with that music and stage it. And that was a challenge in itself because they had to be serious, still have fun doing it, but they had to be serious and not make it look like Mickey Mouse or, that they were actually sending it up.
Yeah.
And they really did a good job of that, and they owned it so much that we were rehearsing and the bell went and they said, can we do it again?
Oh.
Normally when the bell goes, and that was home time. Normally when the bell goes, everybody's, out the door. I've got to catch the bus. I've got to go to sport. Oh, can we do it one more time? So I felt it was successful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I think that definitely shows that they were into it if they're asking to hang around. That's really good. And just going back to the composition side of things, did you give them specific parameters, in the composition? Like, did they have to, apart from the time length, did you give them any other parameters or sort of guidelines to work in?
Yeah, in that scaffolding that we did before when they filled in lots of things about what they thought was happening in the scene, I also had a column where they had to put what sort of sounds. So, were the sounds percussive or were they gentle or so they had describing words for those sounds. So and also I found some music, I said we did some drama beforehand. I'd actually found already created music and tracks, and they had actually rehearsed to that music. So they already had a feeling for how it was actually going to be. It didn't have to be exactly the same, but they had the same sort of mood. And so when they were in group 2 and they had to do, the group 1, the party, and it had to have that little interruption, or they were in the group that was straight after the earthquake, they already knew that it was going to be sort of slow and eerie.
Yep.
So that was kind of their parameters. But I think if you'd just gone straight in and said, do an earthquake project, it could have been quite a disaster.
I think so too, yeah. I think it works so much better if you have a few limitations or guidelines or something.
It was a lot of work for me. I always take a bite off more than I can chew, really.
So do I.
Yeah, and sometimes I felt, look, am I doing it all for them? But, when I saw the finished product and saw what they'd done, I thought, no, that was really worth doing all that background work before we at that point.
And did you put it together in Soundtrap as well? Like, so you pieced it all together in there? Yeah. So they had sent it to you. And how did that process? I'm just trying to picture that process, like when you're in Soundtrap and the student has sent you access to their project, and then did you open up, say, the first one, and then did you copy and paste other ones into the first one?
I had to make a new project, and I think I had several goes, and I had problems with which one was which and everything. I had to name them and that. But I think what I did was I had a new project and I copied and pasted. And so I kind of, or maybe I took their bit and put it on the end of their project, the bit that I wanted. So, they had this, minutes worth or whatever, and then I would find the bit that I wanted, and then I'd edit it in theirs and put it on the end, and then copy and paste that and put it into the main one. It was a bit frustrating because I didn't know what I was doing. Yeah, but obviously got there in the end. But I don't know how you would do that in GarageBand. That would take a lot of.
I would probably go about it in a similar way. Actually, you'd have multiple GarageBand projects open and then copy and paste from one to the other. That works quite well in GarageBand, but it's probably a bit easier in a way in Soundtrap because of that collaboration feature.
other thing that was good about the collaborations is while they were actually working on it, I could listen to what they were doing and make suggestions before they actually finished.
Yeah. Can you tell people more about, for those that might not have used Soundtrap at all, say, we've mentioned this collaboration feature a bit, but can you describe to someone who hasn't seen Soundtrap kind of like how it looks and feels? I mean, basically if you log into a project, let's say I'm a student and I have a project open, there is a little option on the top right-hand side, I think, for a memory where you can invite other people, isn't there, to your project? And then what are the steps after that? How do the students use that, and do you use that?
I think you get it on, just from memory because it's a bit of time ago now, I think you get it on in your program, so you see theirs there. Yes. And but you can both actually be doing it at the same time. So that's where the group, when they decided to work in a group, they could both be doing it, or some of them just said, "Oh, let's just use your screen," depending on
both sit at the same laptop. That makes sense. They felt.
I mean, I really, honestly, don't know too much about all the technicalities of it yet, but we managed to get it to work. So I suppose that's the good advertisement for it.
Absolutely. And I always compare it to Google Docs in a way, like if you both log into a Google document, which is, like a Word document, you can have more than one person in there and both be typing at the same time and see the other person add stuff. So, I think it works really well.
They can appear too, like we are on Skype, you can see this and too if you want to actually have a chat. So you can collaborate with the actual project, or you can actually collaborate by, talking to them. By talking,
yes, that's true. Yes, there's like a little video and chat feature in there too. I think that's a great benefit that Soundtrap has over, because it's an internet-based, web-based program. It's the one thing it has over a number of other software programs. So, yeah, it's really good. I think it's a great project, and it's quite extensive. I mean, did you know how big it was going to be before you started out, or did it become bigger than Ben-Hur, as they say?
Oh, just about everything I do is like that. I guess, after the kids have done the work, the teacher takes it home and has a fair bit to do, and you get wiser and smarter as time goes on, and this was just my first one. So I actually do want to do another one this year. I haven't quite sorted out exactly what it is, but I do want to do another one. So I'll get to know a bit more about how it works.
Yeah, I think it's good that you weren't put off by that first one, and that, you're in that mindset of wanting to change it and that sort of thing. And did you write down, so here's what I'm trying to do now with everything that I've done recently that's new, and if I think I'm going to do it again, I'm trying to always write down what I did, because inevitably I'll go back to it 6 months later and go, how did I do that thing where I pieced all the things together in one project, and so I'm trying to write everything down so that for my future self, and then I'll go into it later on and be able to see that the steps I took and then improve from there.
Not sure that I did it with Soundtrap, but I do generally do that, like with my annual concert. As soon as it's finished, I get the feedback and I save that into, next year's folder. So that's the first thing I look at when I start planning.
Oh, that's a great idea.
The same mistakes again.
That's great.
I must remember to do that with Soundtrap as well.
And what was the parents' reaction when they watched the concert? Did they enjoy it and appreciate it as well?
I think so, yes. I think so. Well, the class teacher was extremely proud of them, and I think they were very proud of themselves. And yes, I remember I get a lot of feedback from the concerts, and those particular items are mentioned, a number of times. In our case, it's a music concert, so it was a little bit different. But I like to sort of push the boundaries a bit, and part of my reason is so that every year level actually performs. They all perform in a finale at the end, but so they actually are doing a year level item as well.
Yeah, that's great.
The previous year we actually wrote a song. We had a composer come and help us, and we wrote a song, but we did it with both classes, and that was so hard for the timetabling. That's why I ended up doing separate ones this year.
With the students that didn't do the natural disasters one, the ones that were doing the more humorous thing, did you do a project which was similar with them, or something completely different?
We didn't use computers, but what we did do, we had actors, singers and musicians. So a number of the children that were in the junior band, and this was again through finding what their strengths were. So I'm comfortable with acting, I love to be out front, or I want to be a sets and props person, or I want to be the musician. And one of our tutors arranged the music for the level of the children. So I ended up having to have separate practices, practice for the band, practice for the singers and actors, and then we sort of put it all together.
Yeah, that's great. And did someone video record the natural disasters one? That was what I was going to ask before.
Yes, I do have a video of it, yeah. I guess it doesn't, looking at it on stage, probably it was taken from up in the gallery. It's, it loses perhaps some of the impact that you feel when you're there yourself with the children, but and when you know it sort of inside out. But I think it was videoed, yeah.
Well, I think you did really well, and I think it's excellent to hear when people are sort of trying new things still. And some teachers say to me, "Oh, look, I'm just too old to try new things, or too old for technology, or I didn't grow up with it." And my response is always, "Well, I didn't either, and now I have a whole business based around it." And that it's just a case of really starting small, but particularly that thing you said about telling the students up front, hey, I don't know much about this, but we're just going to give it a go. And I think that makes everybody on side, they become willing to try and to help and to look into things. And like you said, they're comfortable with the technology, and then it's
part of the learning that we're a community, isn't it? And the teachers not having all the answers, and also part of how the future is going to be, because there's always going to be new technology, and we're trying to train our students of how do we actually cope with new things all the time. So the teacher's a bit vulnerable in that situation, but I think it becomes very authentic.
Yep.
And the kids respect you, and it becomes exciting because you're in this thing together and you're actually doing real stuff. And if I didn't have this creative approach, I think I'd die as a teacher. I mean, sometimes I myself, why don't I take an easier road? But I love it because it just keeps me sparking and keeps me, thinking, and it just makes coming to work, so enjoyable because it's different every year.
Yeah. I think you and I are very similar. I am exactly the same, and I probably don't need any new ideas for about 10 years, but I can't help it. You see something and I'm like, oh my gosh, that would be awesome to do this with or this with. And then I end up developing materials around it, and there's just so much you can do. And you see the cool, exciting things online, and I start thinking, I really want to do that now as well. And it's very motivating when you can see the benefits. Yeah, so well done.
You have time for me to tell you about another project? I just remembered that.
Please.
That I started last year, and I'm going to keep it going, and it's totally different, but it's with our local nursing home. And that thing how music can actually wake up the brains of people with dementia and Alzheimer's and so on. I've seen that in person, in the past, and I wanted to be able to do something with the children. So we have a project with the Year 4s called the Memories Project, and we survey the residents at this particular home and find out what their favourite music is from times gone by. And so we go on 4 visits, and I purchased, the headphone splitters.
Oh, yes.
So the kids are buddied, two Year 4s with a resident. So they're buddied with a resident, and they play. They've got to listen. In the weeks at school, they've got to listen to the music and find out what they like out of it. So, for instance, Jailhouse Rock from Elvis Presley was a favourite from some of them, and What a Wonderful World, from some others. And so they would pick 5 of the songs out of the long list we got, and then they would play those to the resident, and they had a little sheet they had to fill in about how the resident reacted, and in most cases there was a beautiful reaction.
Oh.
Then they had to pick one of those songs and do a little project on it, so they had to present it in some way. So some chose to actually do a PowerPoint on that song, some actually learnt to sing it off by heart as a little item to their resident, some of them printed the words in big so they could sing along with them, just whatever they wanted to do. And so that was the 3rd visit. And then on the 4th visit, because we always started with a time together as well, just singing and playing with clapsticks and scarves and things. And then when we finished, the Year 4s put on a concert to those.
Fantastic.
In our quiet time, we practiced. We did a happiness medley, which was, like Zippity Doo Dah and all those old songs. And it was such a great thing that the home itself really loved. And we worked with dementia patients and Alzheimer's patients in the memory unit. And the frustrating thing was that sometimes they weren't there, or, we didn't quite get the person we were supposed to. Technology side of it, I had to take the IT guy with me because we had to log into their internet, and I had made individual playlists for every computer, and I'm not going to do that this year. I'm going to have the one big playlist and the kids just select.
Yes.
They know what, because that was just a nightmare. So, but the actual process of doing it all and the outcome was fantastic, and something that our school wants to see continue.
That sounds fantastic. That's really good. And how did you have the playlists? I'm just curious about the playlists. How did you have those on a memory stick and then you put them on the computers, or in? Yeah,
I used, I have a Mac at home, so I have a big iTunes library. So in most cases, I could find the songs myself, or from CDs, or download from the internet or whatever. But once I got my whole thing together, I put them under the names of the residents on a USB, stuck the USB into the kids' computer. But we don't need to do that. See, we could do it all via the internet.
Yes. Spotify playlists or something. Yeah.
So that's something I've got to investigate this year. That's next term, so that's coming up.
Excellent. Well done. And it's good. Every time you do a big project like this, there's always things you go, okay, next time I'll do this differently, and it will save time. And it's just, you just have to kind of go through that, don't you? And learn and work things out as you go along. Really good. I love what you're doing. I think it's lovely, and I think the underlying motivation for you seems to always be the end result. You know what the end result, that it's going to be a great one, and that the residents in that case are going to have great feedback, and that's always a good motivational thing.
I was just lovely seeing them smiling, and some of them were sort of moving their arms, and I don't normally do this, they'd say, and, just their whole faces light up, and even some of the families came along and said, he our uncle or our husband or whatever, he never talks, but look, he's singing, and that's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's such a powerful thing, absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing your story. And I was really happy, when I said to you on email, hey, would you like to come on and chat about it? And you basically replied straight away and said yes. So that was a really good thing. And so it's been great to chat to you today. Thanks so much, Jenny.
I haven't talked to anybody about it before, so that's good.
Well, I think everybody should share more things. I'm actually going to put a bit of a call out. You and I were talking about this earlier, to other teachers who might want to share a specific project that they've been working on. Because I think often it's more real. It's just more interesting to hear about, real projects in real schools with real teachers and how they work and whatnot. So thank you for agreeing to come on.
Pleasure.
I really enjoyed hearing about Jenny's project with her grade 6 students, and I asked her if I could play their finished composition in this episode. It's around 3 minutes long, and as Jenny described during our chat, there are 6 sections that tell the story of the earthquake. First, there's the street scene and party. Then there's a pause, followed by a sound and the earthquake itself. And following that, there is the still aftermath of the earthquake and the emergency services arriving, and it finishes with a rebuilding section. So here is that composition. The Music Tech Teacher podcast is hosted by me, Katie Wardrobe. You can find more information and links from today's episode at midnightmusic.com.au/52. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.